Calling the meeting to order. Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's currently 6:02 p.m. My name is Claire McKenna, and I'm the chair of the Ann Arbor Energy Commission. And I'm participating from Ann Arbor. Welcome to the July meeting of the Energy Commission. We're meeting electronically tonight, but we'll conduct this meeting like in-person meetings. Commissioners, during roll call, please indicate your current location. Also, during the meeting, please remain on camera, just as you would be visible during in-person meetings. Finally, mute your microphone when not speaking. So shall we go? Okay, let me keep going. Yep, public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call one of the following two toll-free numbers: 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099, and enter the meeting ID 956-8718-7876 on your phone. This information will also be available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN, Channel 16, AT&T Channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. Joe, can you help us with the land acknowledgement?
You bet. I acknowledge that the land the city of Ann Arbor occupies is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, including Odawa, Ojibwe, and Bodewabmi and Wyandot peoples. I further acknowledge that our city stands, like almost all property in the United States, on lands obtained, generally in unconscionable ways, from indigenous peoples. The taking of this land was formalized by the Treaty of Detroit in 1807. Knowing where we live, work, study, and recreate does not change the past, but a thorough understanding of the ongoing consequences of this past can empower us in our work to create a future that supports human flourishing and justice for all individuals.
Thank you, Joe. Can you please take the roll call?
Yep, one person is just joining, so let me get them in there. All right. Yep, and then as noted, if you can mention where you are at when you indicate whether you're here. Heard Commissioner Berkowitz will be unable to make it. Councilmember Briggs?
Yes, here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Colvin Garcia?
Present, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Harp?
Hi, here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes, I'm here from Ann Arbor.
Chair McKenna.
Sorry.
Yes, no, you're doing good. We heard you that time. Doing good.
Here, join.
Commissioner Overpeck.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Redina indicated he will not be able to make it. Commissioner Sendra.
Here, joining from Buenos Aires.
Commissioner Smith, I'm not seeing at the moment. And then Commissioner Zittelman.
Here in Ann Arbor.
All right, Chair, you have a quorum.
I was missed in the.
Oh, Mike, you're right. My apologies. Commissioner Mursky, you threw everything off. That's my
present
bad.
And here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Now we're good.
And should we do some introductions just to get to know Commissioner Sendra and introduce ourselves to them?
Yeah, do you want me to just, I can just go through and call on people. And yeah, so
Great.
For folks who don't know, we have a new commissioner joining us, Commissioner Sendra. So if we just want to go around, I'll call on you based on where I see on my screen. If you want to just give a quick little overview of who you are, what you do, and why you're here. We'll start with Commissioner Levin.
Hi, welcome to the commission. My name's Noah. I've been on the commission for a good while now. Originally from New Jersey, and I originally came to Ann Arbor as a student at the School of Natural Resources. I also have a law degree that I got from Lewis and Clark, and I've done a bit of environmental work over the years, mostly involving air pollution, from stationary sources, also a little bit of indoor air issues, and currently live on the west side with my wife and 2 kids who go to STEAM. And welcome again.
Chair McKenna.
Hi, Commissioner Sandra. My name is Claire. This is my first meeting as the chair. I've been on the commission for about a year. I'm currently a PhD student at the School of Environment and Sustainability, the U of M. And I'm going to be presenting on my work today, so you'll hear much more about my career and my work. So I'll leave it at
that. Commissioner Harp.
Hi, welcome. My name's Gabriel Harp, and I've been on the commission for, I think, about the same time as Chairperson McKenna, just about, or maybe a little less than a year. And my background, I have a background not only in design, but also in strategic communications and engagement around climate change. I currently work with the Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning, focusing on research and creative practice development. So I work with our faculty, but also on projects and helping think about research programs and engagement programs that think about sort of long-term strategy, particularly around areas of climate change and adaptation. So welcome.
Commissioner Colvin Garcia.
Hello, Commissioner Sandra, welcome. I am the immediate past vice chair. Oh, well, technically I'm the outgoing vice chair. I'm also outgoing in other areas too, as my personality, but okay, we'll set that aside. I've been participating on the Energy Commission since 2017, and my interests are in decarbonized transportation. I've been actively participating in the community, bringing solar power to public schools. The first array was done as part of a volunteer project with my kids attending the school system here. And I am really glad that you're joining us, and it'll be really, really interesting and hopefully contributive and productive as we move together with your membership.
Commissioner Mirsky.
Welcome, Jacob. As one of the people who reviewed your application, we're glad to have you. You have an impressive application, so it's great that you're joining us. I'm the former chair of the Energy Commission, like Carlene. We both served 3 years, so we were term limited, so to speak. I'm retired. I worked in industry for the German company Bosch my entire career. I've been on the commission since 2016, and I'm active generally in sustainability and housing related activities here in Ann Arbor. Welcome aboard.
Commissioner Zittelman. Commissioner Zittelman.
Sandra, I'm Alex. I have been on the Energy Commission about a graduated U of M, the undergraduate degree in public policy, focus on my interests generally lie around housing and transportation and transformation. So feel free to talk to me.
Just let you know you're cutting in a little bit here and there, but we got overall what you were saying. So just a heads up there. Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks. Yes, welcome. Thanks for volunteering to serve the community and on the commission. So I am a council member from the 5th Ward, was elected in 2020, and serve as liaison to the Energy Commission along with Councilmember Radina. I'd also previously served on the Energy Commission back in maybe 2008, 2009 as a citizen volunteer, and subsequently on a number of other commissions, and the Planning Commission before election. And my passion areas, what got me excited about running for city council, are my background in environmental, transportation, and land use policy. So those are sort of the areas that I work on and try to champion on city council. And excited to have you joining us.
Commissioner Overbeck.
Hi, welcome. I'm Jonathan Overpeck, and I go by Peck, believe it or not. And I'm a climate scientist, been a climate scientist since the late 1970s. And I'm an academic scientist currently at the University of Michigan in the School for Environment and Sustainability. And I also have 2 kids now at the University of Michigan.
Then Commissioner Sendra, over to you.
All right. Thank you so much. It's an honor to meet you guys all tonight. I'm very excited to get to work with you. As a lifelong resident of Ann Arbor and as a current student studying political science at the University of Michigan, who's very involved in climate and energy advocacy on campus, I really hope to bring a valuable perspective to this commission to assist in the really essential work supporting efforts to build a just, equitable, and sustainable energy future for everybody in this community. I'm very excited to get to work. Thank you.
Thanks. And yeah, we've met previously, but again, I'm Joe. I'm the staff liaison here. I work for the city of Ann Arbor's Office of Sustainability and Innovations, and just kind of help staff and help get you all the resources that you need to keep doing all the great things everyone's doing. So, Chair, back to you.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as posted? In a second. Commissioner Mirsky first and Commissioner Levin second. Thank you. Commissioners, please raise your hand if you want to propose changes or discuss an issue on the agenda. Posted. No, seeing no hands raised. All those in favor of approving the agenda as posted, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Thank you. And I see no, everyone's included there. So thank you. The agenda is approved. All right. And now I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes as posted in a second. Councilmember Briggs first and Commissioner Colvin Garcia is the second. Thank you. Commissioners, please raise your hand if you want to propose changes or discuss an issue related to the minutes. Thanks. And seeing no hands raised, all those in favor of approving the minutes as posted, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And all those opposed, please raise your hand and say no. All right. I didn't see Commissioner Zittelman weigh in, but maybe he's frozen. But I say that the minutes are approved. All right, now we'll move to public input. This is an opportunity for people to speak for up to 3 minutes. If you're watching on CTN, please call 888-788-0099 or 877-853-5247 and enter the meeting ID 956-8718-7876. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and the video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. To electronically raise your hand and indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sound so that we may hear you clearly, and please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
Don't currently have anyone in queue, but I'm going to give it like 20 seconds or so, just in case. All right, no callers at this time.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So we'll move forward to our first business item. That's the election of the vice chair. Joe, do you have any input on how you'd like to proceed on that?
Nope. I think we can just go ahead and, if anyone wants to, again, either self-nominate or anyone wants to nominate someone else, they can go ahead and do so. The only thing I'll note is Commissioner Smith had previously mentioned interest in the position, but Commissioner Smith is not currently with us at the moment. So, but outside of that, feel free to discuss, nominate, self-nominate, all those things.
I would like to nominate Gabriel or Gabe Harp.
Do we need a second on that? I'd like to second that. Commissioner Colvin Garcia.
I second. Sorry.
Great.
And then Commissioner Harp, do you want to just give a quick overview of your interest and why you'd be a good fit for the position?
Sure. Thank you for the nomination. When I wasn't able to attend the previous meeting where nominations were initially occurring, and initially I had not expressed interest, but I reached out to Joe and said that I would be willing to serve in the position to help fill that role and help the commission carry out its business. Also helping back up whoever the chair might be at the time, which wasn't known at the time. So I'm really excited about this commission. I'm really excited about the work that the commission is undertaking, particularly as we sort of seek to parse through, I think, a lot of the different, not only technical issues and trade-offs associated with some of the programs and some of the policies, but also how to weigh in and parse through some of the policies and how they may impact particularly a wide range of residents in ways that are not only equitable but impactful as well. And so I'm just excited about the work and helping move that forward. So thank you for the nomination.
Fantastic. Thank you. Do we have any other nomination? Oh, yes. Yes.
I would also like to nominate Commissioner Smith for the role as well.
Do we have a second on that?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure. Thank you.
Commissioner, is this like a co-vice chair when you say Commissioner Harp as well, or do you mean to you just like to nominate Commissioner Smith as to have her on the ballot, so to speak?
The latter. It was my understanding that Commissioner Smith was also interested in the role, and I just wanted to make sure that a nomination went forward as well.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any Councilmember Briggs?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to weigh in on that nomination, which I think is very nice of you to have kind of brought her name forward. I think if maybe she was here tonight, I might feel more comfortable with, having that sort of that dual nomination. I think maybe it might. I'm not sure if it's entirely fair to her to have her not be able to sort of speak tonight. I don't know, Joe, if you've had any more conversations with her, if she's definitely still interested in the position, or
I have not heard since before the last meeting, at least, which at that point in time, they expressed interest.
Okay. Commissioner Murphy.
Thank you. As far as I know, Commissioner Smith didn't get a second in terms of the nomination. So unless somebody else seconds her, then it's sort of a moot point. I just like to make a few comments about Gabe. Shortly after he joined the commission, he reached out and met with me for over an hour and we talked about the commission and roles on the commission, the kind of work we're doing. His attendance has been really good. He's also emailed me on a number of other occasions with comments and questions. I very much admire Commissioner Smith. If somebody else wants to nominate her, that's fine, but or second the nomination, I should say. But right now, I think we have a nomination and second for Commissioner Hart. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks. I want to just elevate Councilmember Briggs's comments. Just considering the fairness of not having Commissioner Smith represent themselves at this point. Commissioner Levin, did you want to share something?
I just technically, I don't think we need a second. We just need them to accept the nomination. But if she's not here, then she obviously can't do that. So I don't think we can go forward with her on the ballot. But I don't know if she's planning to be late and we could postpone this or not. That was the only other thing I was thinking. But if we don't know, I guess we just have to move on.
I have not heard from Commissioner Smith.
Commissioner Morski, is that a new hand?
Yeah, I would just like to point out we're electing officers to a one-year term. It's not like this is a 3-year appointment or something like that. And I think we should keep that in mind. I'm a little bit reluctant to postpone this on the agenda. I mean, it's been on the agenda. I mean, there could be extenuating circumstances, but Commissioner Smith would have an opportunity to serve in a role, in a leadership role, and at some time in the future if she was really interested. She's only in the first year, I think, of her appointment, so she still had an opportunity in the future.
I think that's a great. Does anyone else want to weigh in on this? I'm inclined to, I guess, move forward with our one candidate. Does anybody? I don't know if this is an official question, but does anybody oppose that? This is sort of a not a choice of candidate so much. Moving forward with Gabe. Okay. Well, based on our rigorous election, Commissioner Harv, we've chosen you as the vice chair. So congratulations.
I think we need a vote.
We need to vote.
Technically, yeah.
We need to
Would need
officially
one vote.
All right. Everybody in favor of Commissioner Hart taking the vice chair position, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Fantastic. 2, 4, 6. And I didn't see Commissioner Zittelman. Okay. And all those who oppose, please raise your hand and say no. Okay, Commissioner Zittelman. Thank you. Yeah, our majority shows a vote of yes for Commissioner Harp. So thank you so much for voting and for your candidacy. And you're now the vice chair. Cool. All right. Shall we move on? It looks like I'm next to present on the agenda. So I can do that now. I'll share my screen and share this information with you. I think I just want to say before I start that we have been talking about sharing my research for a little while, and this is just a chance to bring up some recent findings. I actually submitted this work for publication today. I hit send and submit this afternoon. So it's a pretty big day for me, and it's kind of a celebration that we get to share this information. All right. All right, so here we go. I can see most of you, so if there's any issue, please let me know. All right, so exploring an equitable transition to clean heating in cold climates. I do this work at the University of Michigan School for Environment and Sustainability, as mentioned earlier. The SEAS program funds my work partially, and I'm also funded by the U.S. Department of Energy in a really cool program called iBuild, Innovation in Buildings Graduate Research Fellowship. And I'm currently going into my second year of funding with that fellowship. So it's a great way to kind of elevate my work to the national level and have it participate in the national conversation about how to invest in our society moving forward. Before I begin, I just want to share how I arrived at this work. I started right after college as a solar engineer. So electrical was my discipline at that point. And I learned how to design solar PV systems on rooftops. I've always been interested in buildings and definitely focused on building integrated renewable energy. Then I moved into the tall building construction space as a building engineer and spent 6 years working from, pre-planning on large projects. This is, I believe this is Salesforce Tower in San Francisco when it was a hole in the ground. Now it's a 1,000-foot tower that absolutely dwarfs everything else on the skyline. And I moved from that into doing this work, which, growing up in New York City, I never thought that I'd be interested in suburbs and sort of single family housing in the way that I am now. But I think there's so much to be said for the density of housing that we have and kind of how it's aged through the decades. And that's where I focus my work today. So when we talk about transition to clean heating, we have to first talk about a national look, some work that has been done recently by my PhD advisor, Parth Vaishnav. This work was done when he was a faculty at the Carnegie Mellon University. Of course, now he's at University of Michigan. But so we know from his work and from some others in the literature that switching to a heat pump is going to increase energy costs, residential energy costs for many folks around the country. This graph is showing us that those costs are going to be worse in Michigan. And so that piqued my interest several years ago, and that sort of got me on the path to studying this more in depth. So add to that layer the fact that historically marginalized communities across our country already experience the highest energy burdens, meaning that they pay the highest proportion of their income to energy costs and utility costs. And so we know which folks, which communities and kind of categories of people around the country are experiencing those really high energy burdens and the health stress and day-to-day stress that comes along with that. Those are low income folks, of course. With the lowest incomes, they're paying the highest percentage. But at the same time, you have communities of color, older adults with energy burdens above the national average. And you can also see that there's some kind of association with housing vintage. And so this kind of kicks off the concept that we can go a little bit further and both understand the societal or the demographic components that kind of expose folks to energy burden or high energy burden. But we also know that they're in the literature, especially the work kind of done in the Detroit area, specifically by Dr. Tony Reams, who's an amazing environmental justice researcher currently at the Department of Energy on leave from SEAS. But we know that there's a disparity in the quality of housing across this country along income and race lines, and that is a thing that's really at the core of energy burden. So when you look at housing from the 20s, 30s, and 40s that hasn't been maintained, and of course maintenance is relative, but we think about central AC versus window AC, the kinds of holes that may open up in roofs and around chimneys, the kind of installation value of windows and all that stuff that goes into exposing folks' households to high energy burden as well. So I am currently conducting field research, empirical research that looks at the energy burden of 51 households in our area. So I'm working with Wayne, across Wayne and Washtenaw counties. Most of my households are in Ypsi and Ann Arbor and Detroit, and some kind of east and west Ann Arbor as well, Livonia and Chelsea. And this, what I'm showing here is the energy burden on the y-axis, and on the x-axis, this is every single household. So this kind of gives you an idea of where the folks are when they started, before any intervention or any consideration of energy efficiency or moving to a all electric heating system. So it makes sense. It's kind of a common sense kind of a set of results here, right? The folks below median income, of course, are going to have the highest energy burdens, and then some kind of dispersion through the middle. And the folks that make the most are going to be least exposed to high energy burden. So my study, again, includes 51 houses, and it's really cool because I got to go to each home and with a professional that was hired for the study, conduct an energy audit at every home. So this is the kind of highest level of energy auditing service that you can get. It's kind of publicly available. There's a whole blower door test, which tests for air leakage in the home. It also includes physical inspection and some thermal imaging, like kind of what you're seeing here below. In addition, so there was a detailed walkthrough of every single home, and of course notes taken and values noted on all of those elements that kind of drive energy use in the home. I also studied the metered utility data for each home and installed a smart thermostat in every home. So I actually have information about how folks are using their homes' heating and cooling systems. So based on all the data that I gathered through the home energy audits, I'm finding that the energy use intensity per occupant, so this is the energy use of the entire home per year over the area and then over the occupant. So it's kind of normalized for square footage of the home. So basically we're comparing apples to apples, a home that's 1,000 square foot to a home that's 4,000. And then at the same time, accounting for how many folks are live in the home. And so what I want to point out here is that the orange curve, this is hilariously close to maize and blue, but I didn't mean for it. So the orange curve here across my income bracket. So on the x-axis, I have 4 different buckets where I've sorted income, self-reported income from across the households. And the box and whisker plot basically shows the maximum and minimum, and the median is in the line here. And so the median across these is decreasing from lowest income group to the highest earners across the sample. And interestingly, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I also found that about 25% or 13 homes in the sample were retrofit by Habitat for Humanity before the study began. And so we actually got to see the difference between low-income homes, that were retrofit and those that weren't, and that were kind of market rate. And so, of course, the curve applies here for the market rate homes. And I wanted to show that I'm breaking out these income groups. The below 25,000 and between 25 and 50,000 groups are considered below median income for their county, while the 50 to 75,000 earners are at the median income for whatever county they're in, and of course above is above median. So here are the main findings of what I studied. So I'll give you a second to absorb this and also kind of talk over it while I kind of describe what the goal of the study is. So with the basis of energy burden, trying to kind of put a finger on what the income or burden impact would be to move to a heat pump for individual households. And so we have some kind of preliminary data from national studies that show, I think that the thing that concerned me and that drove me to this work is that I'm seeing some publications and some propaganda, but maybe messaging from the Department of Energy and the federal government that says, hey, and definitely from companies, hey, move to a heat pump and it's not going to cost anybody anymore for energy. And that's not the case. Actually, when you think about folks that are, reliant on natural gas, like most of us in southern part of Michigan are, there's actually going to be quite a significant cost increase for folks. And so what I did was take another step and say, okay, well, compared to their income, kind of where does that put them? And so I'm showing 4 different cases here, but if we can just focus on the first one here, this is kind of where the main finding lies. So this is a change in energy burden on the y-axis, going from where they were. So that's that first graph that I showed, some folks were starting at 30 or 40, and then the highest earners were down at 2% or 3%. So they're spending 2% or 3% of their income on energy utilities. This accounts for about a 6% change in energy burden. So if folks, maybe someone in this category that makes less than $25,000 today, started at an energy burden of, let's say, 5, 6, 7%, they're going to be adding 6%. So that's gets to an egregious or severe. I don't know if the scale goes to egregious, but I'll just comment and say that I think that at that level, it's untenable. We can't ask folks who already struggle to pay their bills, who already see the repercussions of being on the lower end of the income spectrum in our society, relative to shutoffs and risk of shutoff and the kind of the stress of extreme heat and cold in their homes, when they suffer from energy insecurity, as someone who has a high energy burden does. Just kind of highlighting that there is a really steep drop off when we think about folks' impact for going to a heat pump if they're on natural gas today. And then finally, I'll share that while the effect is egregious down on the lower end of the income spectrum, in fact, on the higher end, we're seeing also a 50% increase. And so folks that had 1 or 2% energy burden starting off are going to see about a 1 percentage point increase as well. And so it's basically showing that everybody across the income spectrum is going to be affected, and maybe some folks on the higher end, median income and above, might be destabilized financially if they do have to move to a heat pump without any energy efficiency or any kind of utility cost mitigation strategies that I recommend. My paper does include a lot more of those, and I'll share a little bit more about that before I wrap up here. So having an energy audit contractor come to each home, actually that person recommended the energy retrofit measures that would be appropriate for each of the homes. And here's a frequency count of what all of those are across the board. On the left, kind of in the yellow and green and blue, we're looking at building envelope upgrades. So this is working with insulation, this is getting new windows. And then on the right-hand side here, we have some appliances and some other equipment upgrades. So when I say there's no clear pattern for energy cost savings, while there were some common upgrades that were recommended across the sample, you can look at the breakdown for what the utility cost savings for each individual home was. That's being shown here on an annual basis, and see that there's not something that we could come away and say, oh, okay, well, for most of these homes, this is the case. Or if I took this neighborhood, or if I took all of 48197 or 48014, this is something that we can do. And I'd love that for that to be the case. I think that, this kind of meshes a little bit with what the city of Ann Arbor is currently working on with, energy. I don't know what you guys are, you can correct me, Joe, when I'm done here, but I don't know. I've heard it called energy case manager, or just energy advocate, someone that can kind of help folks understand specifically what they need for their homes. But it's just interesting that there isn't a clear pattern, even though there's a lot of similarities across the housing stock in this area. I wanted to point out that, the thing that shows me that the most is that there's air sealing that was recommended for every single household. Like, that is a thing that if I were to say, if anybody in this area were to ask me, what should I do to save on my utility bills, I'd say definitely air sealing. But, it's going to save some people 5-8 times what it would save others. And so how do we know who those are, without doing the work of getting an energy assessor in there? And so that kind of just shows me the importance of having that on the ground interaction with folks, and really going into homes and making sure we know what the situation is. Okay, and I'll just wrap up by sharing that my next step in the research is qualitative exploration of attitudes towards going to a heat pump. I think in this area, especially in Ann Arbor, there's some incentives coming and some support from the city to get folks to move to heat pumps. And so I started to do some interviews across the sample, and it's just brought up a lot of interesting insight around how people use their thermostats to control their energy costs, and whether or not they think they can afford extra costs, and also just the idea of comparing themselves to others, and how folks get their information about what might be best done for their home, both to improve their comfort and their family's comfort, and improve their energy bills. So I'll wrap up with that, and I can take some questions if you'd like. Commissioner Levin?
Yeah, thanks. a couple questions. One quickly, could you just like explain specifically what you're referring to when you say air sealing? Is that just, so that's not insulation, right? That's like specific spots where there's like big gaps or something?
Yeah, so there doesn't necessarily need to be specific spots where there are big gaps, but I think a gap is a good way to think about it. One of the main areas that folks need air sealing is around their rim joist, which is where basically the wooden structure of the house meets our Michigan basement. And so that is typically, the joists kind of go and meet that external wall surface, and there's nothing there really except for wood. And so that's a place where a lot of outside air is coming in. And in fact, yeah, the kind of primary place where folks would see.
Okay, but that is sort of like a type of insulation. You tend to like spray an insulation in the rim joist, right? Is that what you're typically doing?
Right. It's definitely an insulating material. It's spray foam, but I think it's typically separated from insulation because it's more about stopping the flow of air.
Okay.
Attributing the heat loss there to a flow of air as opposed to a conductive flow through a surface.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then one other question about you said there wasn't like a real clear pattern based on your sample. I'm just wondering, do you think maybe there'd be more of a pattern if you looked at, like, for example, the majority of the houses in my neighborhood are one type of ranch style? Like,
Mm-hmm.
do you think there could be more commonalities in terms of like very similar house structures?
Yeah, I love that.
And
I mean, that's
they were
totally.
built
Yeah, it's really good insight from looking out to your window, and I think that totally is the case. It's a matter of maybe being thoughtful about what those levels of scale are when we think about intervention, and using the resources that we have, let's say as a government, or whether those are financial incentives or organizational resources, to get folks what they need. I think somebody needs to be thinking about that exact question, like what are the scales of similarity, and how do we kind of work with them to maximize the amount of benefit that we can provide with the, of course, limited resources that we have. Cool, thanks. Commissioner Coleman Garcia. Yeah.
My question has to do with the envelope, and you had a simple and you had a complex. Would you mind describing what those are?
Yeah, sure. So simple and complex, I kind of drew the line at how many contractors it would take to get the work done. It's a little bit crude, but thinking about, are you going to ask somebody to spend $1,000? Are you going to ask them to spend $6,000 to get to open up their walls, get additional insulation in there, and then cover them back up? So that would be like an example of a complex. So it's a drywall contractor and an insulation contractor. Where if it's something that's maybe added cellulose insulation into the roof, you just need someone to come out and with a truck and blow it up there. So that's kind of where I did the line.
My other question is, it kind of piggybacks a little bit on what Commissioner Levin was asking as far as air sealing is concerned. Is there any consideration in your study with regards to the cost for offsetting or to be adding ventilation to the house once it's sealed?
That is a great question. So yeah, that's a very, very good question. So no, typically, so currently, there's an air sealing level required by code. And I don't think that any additional outside ventilation is required at that level. So like a new house built today doesn't have any additional, outside air intake than would a normal HVAC system. And so from my experience, spray foam, even the best job that I've seen possible in a retrofit in homes like a ranch home in our area, doesn't get down below the level of today's code. And so it's essentially what I'm saying is that from my experience working with contractors, no additional ventilation is necessary.
All right, thank you.
And if anyone disagrees with that, please weigh in. Great. Commissioner Hart.
Thanks. It's really great to see how you're approaching this and to see some of the results that you're putting together. I had a few questions about sort of how you're approaching some of this work, and the first I had a few about that, and then I also had a question about the first study that you mentioned that looked at the heat pumps. So the first one was just about sort of overall sort of impacts on how are you approaching the relationship between what people do in their homes versus the sort of installed weatherization or technologies in their homes. And so, for example, I know you included like the different time of day rates in the different graphs and analyses. Part of the assumption, I think, around those time of day rates is that there is some shift in practices in terms of energy use and timing, and the cost structure is such. It's like 11 cents for the versus half a cent or something on I think the 1.2 rate. And so how do you sort of approach that angle of things when you hear about things such as turning there's also lots of misrepresentations or misunderstandings about like how HVAC systems work and things like that exist in the world. And so I think I recently just read an article about how it's not very good to sort of turn your thermostat down very much lower to 55 degrees during the summer, because your AC is not necessarily going to cool your house any more than it's set up for capacity to, versus things like pre-cooling versus using shades and things like that. And so I was just wondering sort of how you're thinking about those kinds of things. That's sort of a first question. And then a second question of that is sort of the relationship between costs of materials and installation versus savings. So where how are you sort of approaching what the investment might be relative to the return versus the sort of type of change as well?
Woo! We got a building scientist in the room here. Yeah, thanks for those really insightful and detailed questions. I will start off by saying, great insight on time of use, shifting behavior. That's kind of like a bit of future work, and if you want to collaborate on that, let's do it. Because it's a little bit more difficult to model or anticipate future behavior. One way to do that is to compare, the pre-intervention with the post, right? So if we had some data from before the shift, which I actually do, and we took some more data after the shift, which I actually could, then we would be able to quantify that, and that would be pretty cool. So okay, yep, thank you for that idea. But I'll also say that I spent a pretty significant piece of the paper making sure that I justify or provide evidence for the fact that the more substantial energy use in households below median income is actually due to the envelope and the building itself rather than thermostat behavior. And so because I have smart thermostat data, I show in the paper, I didn't show it here, that there's no pattern similar to what we were finding for energy use intensity, which is like a clear slope. It's statistically significant. There's no statistically significant pattern or trend at all for thermostat temperature. So we can't say, folks, they use, there are more people there, or they use more temperature, they call for more heating or cooling. It's just not the case. So there's a lot more work to do there. But just providing evidence for the kind of building driven as opposed to behavior driven energy use is the main component of the paper. And finally, cost of materials versus a payback. So obviously a major point of contention and discussions, both in the literature in economics and kind of the practical nature of how we move forward with efficiency. I'll say the median kind of payback, simple payback, no discount rates or anything for the efficiency retrofits that were recommended across the sample was 24 years. So that's not something that I think, well, I know because I've asked them in interviews. That's not a level at which people are like, yeah, definitely I'm going to do that tomorrow. That's just not aligned with household investment today. And so one of the things I argue for in the paper is that we provide more detailed information about what specific measures can be done, not just a package, right? Like if you come over here, an energy assessor, and you come to my house and tell me I need spray foam insulation, I need attic blown in cellulose, and I need this and I need that. That's stop listening. Like, I don't have, $10,000-$20,000 to make those upgrades. That's kind of where the price tags were. I think it was a median of $11,000. And so kind of advocating for showing marginal trade-off between, each additional piece of cost and then those that money back. So yeah, that's what I'll share. And there's a lot more detail in the paper, so I can share that with you. Okay, Commissioner Mirsky.
Thanks for sharing your research with us. I think I'm going to be really interested to see what your final findings are. But I've got a couple of topics that I'd like to explore more deeply with you. Like you, I'm concerned with the narrative that I hear from many corners of the, let's call it, energy transition community, that says, simply replace your furnace, or for that matter, your air conditioner with a heat pump, and all of our problems will be solved. And I know you have connections with RMI, and I don't know if you have connections with Rewiring America. I've read Saul Griffith's book, and I've looked at their information, and they're one of the entities that seems to have that narrative. I've also looked at a paper that was recently published by RMI looking at new construction, which I recognize is different, but they claim that in studying 9 metropolitan areas around the United States, that if you look at mixed fuel versus all electric construction, that the construction costs of the single family homes are lower or the same as mixed use, and the utility bills are lower than, or in a few cases, very close to what they are for all electric. I have a hard time believing this narrative and some of these information. I'm wondering if you've contacted people at these organizations or your old contacts and what their sense is of this. And I'll share one other finding, and that is I worked with 4 other people to re-examine the village of Ann Arbor and their development on the north side of town. And they presented information to the Planning Commission indicating that this is, again, new construction on apartments, that going to all electric would increase energy utility bills by roughly, I think it was pretty close to $100 a month. And we redid the calculations, hoping that they were wrong. And we found some assumptions that were wrong. We used multiple different energy models, and yet we found also that the utility costs were going to go up roughly $30 a month. So less than what they claimed, 30 to 40, but still they were going to go up. So I'm wondering, you've done all this research, you've raised this concern. What are other people saying in response to that?
Yeah, I would say right now mine is more of a response to them. My work hasn't been seen that widely, and so I can say that I'm pursuing a PhD because I don't believe in the level of rigor that is being used to make those calculations that you mentioned. Both of those groups, I worked at RMI. I know what happens behind the curtain. Respectfully to all my colleagues there, I feel that there's a different narrative that isn't as popular. I mean, it makes sense. In a sense, both are true. I think it's just a matter of what facts and what scenarios are being elevated. And so while I don't disagree, like pure error aside, right? I think some of the work that you've done recently does point to some maybe like calculation error or assumption error. Like maybe what I'm hearing is that maybe it's around like energy efficiency of certain equipment or the building. Yeah, that we need to correct that. But I think the other folks are looking at more specifically the winning cases and thinking about the positioning of the winning cases and the publicization of the winning cases as something that's going to move the whole movement forward. I find that to be fine, but not enough in the sense that, my concern is for justice and equity and thinking about a transition that rolls out as every transition this country does or has, maybe like immediately after full electrification of the country to begin with, like adding electricity into rural areas and that kind of thing, spreading electricity across the country. Everything subsequently has been like not representative. Our government isn't representative, and so doesn't represent people and interests of communities of color and of lower income folks. And so when we think about incentives and investment, I think that this work is important to elevate the cases that are not going to be the economic wins, because those are the folks that will not experience economic wins are those that are marginalized and underrepresented. So that's.
If I may engage a little bit further, I don't know if anybody else has something, I'll yield the floor. But I agree with you entirely that this equity issue is really something that needs to be delved into. I think there's a broader issue of just trust. And if we go around to any community, even high income communities, and promise benefits that just aren't borne out, I think that really undermines, the kind of long-term changes that we like to see. And I'm really concerned. One thing I was wondering, I've heard both from the state of Michigan, I think it came from Michigan Saves, but also I've seen national figures that say you invest $1 in energy efficiency and you get $4 in utility cost savings. Have you heard that number before, and do you believe that number?
No.
So you haven't heard the number, or you don't believe the number, or both?
When I hear numbers like that, I think I stop listening. But I will say one thing, kind of to your later points here, John, is that let's say you have the resources to go around and tell people, like you mentioned, even if they're wealthier, that there's a technology coming and that there are benefits available. I think that we need more education. I think that there's a really low literacy of how our homes work, what it means to invest in them in specific ways that may improve unseen qualities. Like, it's not a kitchen renovation, right? But it is something that, maybe not just like change, like kind of supports a broader societal change like electrification, but it is something that could improve your interior air quality or actually improve the dispersion of heating and cooling across your house and make it more comfortable. There's not a lot of literacy, and someone mentioned earlier, like, well, don't people interact with their heating and cooling systems in ways that aren't like correct? And in a sense, yes, right? I mean, but that just goes to the fact that we don't get a user manual. We're sold houses on the real estate market. It happens so quick. Then you end up with something like, it's beautiful on the outside, but like, does it work? Like, you have a whole house plan from 1960. Like, here are the reasons why that's not, that's not the most efficient way to do it now. Maybe it was a trend back then, but here, so there are just so many, so many things to know. And there aren't really any programs that share that with people, I think, in a way that's like exciting or engaging or helpful in kind of communicating what the benefits are to knowing that information. And that is what's needed to make a transition happen, not just the availability of technology, not just the proof that it's going to save money, but making people aware, like kind of like what you hear about electric charging, like, hey, electric charging, like range anxiety, is that bad? There's a little bit more of that information coming out, but I think that we're still living in the past as it relates to housing and building technology.
I got a couple of other things I'd like to explore, if I may. Go ahead. No. So I'm wondering if you're capturing, when people are converting to heat pumps, if you're looking at the efficiency of the unit and whether it's been, if this, in other words, the SEER two-factor, and whether or not the units have been appropriately sized and selected. I mean, a lot of units in the past were, in fact, we heard stories from the Ann Arbor Housing Commission and from Robertson Brothers where very inefficient units that might have been suitable for the South were installed here in the North. And so you have electric resistance heating kicking in order to make up the difference in the wintertime. And that, of course, really jacks up the utility costs. And, what might have been installed as a SEER 13 unit years ago, that's now the floor from the DOE. And there's units that are 21 approaching 22 SEER that are on the market. Of course, they're more expensive. But I'm wondering if you're capturing that kind of information and looking at whether or not some of the results that you're seeing are simply due to bad equipment decisions.
Well, I wouldn't make any bad equipment decisions, would I, John? I think we should end the discussion here just for the sake of moving on and not, there's so much to share, but you and I should catch up. I can go through the model with you in detail. And I can show you all the methods and assumptions, and I think that might be valuable for us. But let's spare people the details of the SEER rating of the heat pump digestion. But I'll say it's not 13. Okay. Anybody else comments? Thank you so much for your patience and frankly interest in this. Of course, I'm getting my PhD in it, so I'm interested in it. Yes, Commissioner Hart.
I just had one quick question, sort of is broadly about the first example you showed, the Weishaupt, the analysis relating to the heat pumps, and it's about sort of the general class of those types of analyses. And what I was wondering is how sensitive that analysis in particular, but also in general, those are to some of the assumptions that they might have made, whether it was in terms of the economics or the technology. And sort of part of that is also to ask, because I think those kinds of analyses are incredibly useful to groups like this commission in terms of being able to sort of deliberate and assess and sort of, draw distinctions between the kinds of assumptions that are made in the details. And I'm really interested in, I think, one, just the sort of availability of those kinds of analyses, but also how if you have any insights, either based on that one or others, of how they can also be how we can use those results in ways that are sort of consistent with a sort of very rapidly dynamic changing environment, both in the policy landscape and the economic landscape, and the ways in which people are adjusting their own situations, or if you have any sense of that. So there's the sort of sensitivity of that one to itself, but also how are there ways that we might be able to better sort of use that type of information?
Yeah, so there's a little bit more information available now. Well, let me start by saying that Dr. Vaishnav's analysis from 2020 is kind of directional, and it created that map and spurred on a lot of interesting research, including mine, from there. And the reason that I do the research that I do is because I'm responding to that, saying, hey, but like it doesn't account for the specific energy cost structures that we have. And it's kind of cool to see that, well, sad, but interesting that DTE has changed their rate structure in the time that I've studied this, saying that like if you look at the there's a national body that kind of that takes in the energy cost data from across the country and can say the average for every year for every state. And so an analysis like Dr. Vaishnav's uses that information, right? So they're looking at the gas and electricity cost assumptions based on kind of a per kilowatt hour or a per unit of energy basis, and not accounting for those finite hourly changes, which mine does. And so what I am saying is that we need to move to more regional research that can actually get to the point of detail where we're actually quantifying how much for an individual household or for a region based on detailed information like that. Like, what's that difference? Because to know what the impact is as a regulatory body or an agency that has a regional jurisdiction, we need to be sensitive to those factors. So those are the two things I wanted to share there. Just that, that information is really helpful, but I think that we need to see more regional information, more regional research pop up. And then lastly, I'll just share that since that paper was published, NREL has come out with a database that has 10 different scenarios for the U.S. housing stock, basically like as it is today, all the way through electrification with and without energy retrofits, building stock as it is today, with and without energy retrofits, and then all kind of in between. So there's more advancement on a national level, and some really sophisticated modeling around those costs. Oh, sorry, around those energy use. But I think that we do need to also model it with our local.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again, everyone, for your patience and engagement there. So let's move on. We next on the agenda, we want to hear an energy report, news from the energy office, and any commissioners.
Yep. I can start with the OSI updates. Don't have a ton again. If everyone, I guess I need to get Commissioner Sender in there if you aren't already. We have our newsletter that went out. Talk about some of the topics here today. And I know it's confusing because the name has changed. It's the Home Energy Advisor Service will be the name of the service that's kind of doing that. Assistance, formerly, as many know, the Energy Concierge name change there. So no worries for being confused on it. But they're currently in they're wrapping up their pilot phase. This month, it has 15 residents across a couple different, building types, living situations, things like that. So once that's wrapped up, we'll have a report. We can talk about it here, and then with plans of that launching later in the fall. There's also, again, related to some of this, there's some stuff on different types of resources, be it on electrification, everything surrounding electrification, as well as different ways to help finance that as well. Outside of that, I just wanted to highlight, we will have one meeting for this, but we'll also be having in August 11th, we'll be having our second home electrification expo, which will be an opportunity for people to be out and talk about different resources, or talk with like contractors, installers, things like that, manufacturers, just to kind of look at some of the stuff that's out there, see what makes sense, and kind of just get that hands-on experience there. Those are some of the main things. Just two little-ish, maybe not little is not the right word, but resources that'll be coming out soon, related to the changing of the rates with DTE. We're just finishing up a kind of like a fact sheet on what those time of day rate changes means, particular for solar customers, because not only are there's the time of day, but also when you get into solar, there's even more things that are a part of it. So just kind of having like a fact sheet there, just to get a sense of like what actually all those things mean and what they make sense for people in that situation, as well as a resource kit for homeowner association and multi-unit developments on like how they can work towards different things, like be it solar, EV charging, different things like that. Just kind of help the process there, and some of those kind of trickier situations will have both resources as well as case studies, and different things like that. So those are the main things I have. Again, the newsletter goes into more detail, as well as a couple other things that have been out there. But
great. It's great to hear that that the home energy advisor pilot is what did you say, wrapping up, and I'm really excited to hear. So I'd love we can talk about this, but get it on the agenda for the coming year. Joe, I'd also be interested in taking a look at the advisory sheet for the new rate, because I modeled the rate. I have some insight on that. If you find it helpful, like particularly folks that have old inefficient AC, like they're going to see the highest impacts and things like that. So I don't know if you have that on there, but if you're looking for another pair of eyes, I'd be happy to help.
Yeah, be happy to send this. I can just, this is here, I can share a screen real quick just to get a sense of what it looks like. Again, this is not final, so don't take this as like this is the final thing. But roughly, here's, of course, Zoom controls cover it all up on my end. But just again, getting a quick sense of like, here's kind of, what the rates are, how it kind of looks for you. Again, kind of breaking down like what does on peak, mid peak, because that's a thing, off peak, all those kind of things, comparing like some of the different, again, the different rates, just kind of breaking down like, what they mean, kind of, again, showing like when, solar outflow, inflow, things like that, to kind of start comparing when the different rates make the most sense for you, thinking about your different considerations, recommendations, And then, kind of breaking down a bill, recognizing this is probably hard to see and can't see everything, but I can share it with you and you can kind of look over from that perspective. But this is kind of what it's going to look like. Again, just kind of help out, be like, because energy bills are not the easiest things to read, which gets even more complicated when you have different peak and off peak and solar rates and all that kind of thing. So just kind of demystify, help break it down, and give people a better sense. So again, this is not the finalized version. It's okay to look at here and things like that, obviously, but making a couple more tweaks, and I'll share that with you in case there's any things you've seen as well that are that can help that out. So
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. Commissioner Murphy.
Yes, I had a quick question for Joe. The press release where the city got $5 million from the state for the landfill solar project indicated that there's still additional funding resources that are needed to make that project viable. Do you have any sense of whether that's $1 million or another $5 million, or what is it going to take to get over the hump on that project? And maybe there's other issues besides raising money above the 5 million. Can you give us a sense of that?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head how much it is financially, but that is the biggest concern or biggest thing to do. I also don't know off the top of my head like how much we asked for. That wasn't like the full amount that we had put in for. So there is more than that. I just don't know the scale of it. But it is, and so for those who John just mentioned, but yeah, 5 million has been approved from the state to move the landfill solar project. It doesn't get us like 100% of the way to where it is, but it's at least enough where we can begin moving forward with some of those final things. Think all the different environmental reviews, permitting, kind of things like that. We can start moving forward as we work to kind of fill that those last buckets. So I don't have off the top of my head how much that's needed. But yeah, we're able to be moving forward to, as we work to fill that instead of being at an entire standstill.
Great. Let's see. We can move next to the report from the Environmental Commission.
The last Environmental Commission had a work session, so there's really nothing to report.
Thank you. And we'll move to our second opportunity for public comment. Once again, the instructions for that are as follows. All right. If you're watching on CCN, please call 888-788-0099 or 877-853-5247 and enter the meeting ID 956-8718-7876. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and the video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. To electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that is the host allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sound so that we may hear you clearly. And please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
Don't have anyone right now, so give about 15 seconds just in case. No one at this time. Again, if anyone's watching and was having any difficulties, feel free to send in a comment to energycommission@a2gov.org.
And we'll move on to our last agenda item, which is to discuss new agenda items moving forward. I'm really curious to hear if anybody has anything on their mind about what we might look at over the next year.
And just as a refresher for all Commissioner Sender, in case this was never, I don't think I brought this up to you at this point, you can just kind of bring forth anything that's, something that is of interest that you'd like to discuss, something like this. I know it says items for next agenda, but if you have something that, it's like, oh, we can't get to that next agenda, but it's something we definitely want on our radar, feel free to put it in at this time as well. So anything that anyone is thinking of that might be interesting doesn't have to, be any, I don't know what I'm saying. Anything energy related, throw something out there if it's of interest to you. So.
Commissioner Murphy?
You won't be surprised by my three topics.
Hit me.
Greenhouse gas inventory. And if I might editorialize for 15 seconds, it's going to be August. I think last year it was August. I think the city wrote to DTE or wrote to the MPSC about not getting data from DTE. Any company knows basic data like its utility usage within a month of their year-end close. I mean, that's just. I mean, I can't say DTE is a world-class company, but most companies can certainly do that. And it's ridiculous that we're still waiting for DTE. So I would encourage staff to get with the administrator and with council to elevate this, because we look at the inventory because it gives us a sense of whether we're on track to meet our targets, and we shouldn't be getting key information 7.5 months into the year. So second topic is HERD, and when we're going to be able to get an update on HERD and when that's going to be going to council. And the same thing with Green Rental Housing Program, which I understand is going to follow HERD. But that was presented in March of last year. So these are topics that are extremely important to me because they impact a huge portion of our housing stock here in Ann Arbor. Do we have any updates on any of those three topics?
I can say, oh, go ahead.
Let's hear some more agenda items, and then we can, if we have time, talk about that. Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks. On agenda items, obviously, we've got the list we generated early in the year, but one of the things that has come up, certainly in the 5th Ward, were the power surges that happened and had a lot of damage to I think it was about 100 homes that were impacted. And I've certainly heard a number of residents have raised questions about, what could have prevented that, what actions could have been taken. I've had conversations with DTE and gotten some information, and I certainly think that they could be providing some more information. But I do think that community members are looking for information, a more neutral third party, and potentially even other utilities or something like that to talk about, what actions could be taken to could have been taken to prevent this and could be taken to prevent it in the future. Because certainly the information that I've gotten is not particularly satisfactory.
Yeah, thank you. I want to share that that's an area of interest for me too. But Councilmember Briggs, could you comment on, you definitely did here, but just more specifically, what perspectives do you think would be helpful? Because something I was thinking about moving forward with the commission is having the opportunity for a bit of a forum, like inviting folks from different perspectives to kind of talk on a topic. Because I think, just getting kind of expanding our view on these issues could be really helpful. And so could you think of anything just I think come to mind? You mentioned what actions could be taken, what could have prevented it, but like would a community perspective help, or anything else?
I know that OSI has solicited input from residents about kind of what their experiences are. So I think we have that likely documented experience. I think that there's likely, from my conversations, it's somewhat challenging for us as a city to identify whether or not, what could have been done to prevent this, or was this out of line? And we don't necessarily have the data,
Okay.
the information as a city to understand really the details of the specific case. And so it's a little challenging, I think, for staff to be able to provide really strong feedback to residents, but it is, from the perspective of DTE, this was act of God. And
yeah.
that's the way things are. And I think residents are looking for more information about, what are the actions that utilities take to prevent incidents like this, and has DTE taken them, or at least what could be done. So,
Okay.
Sort of a knowledge gap that I think we're facing, and limited information coming from, not necessarily always a fully trusted source.
Thank you. Yeah, just that information helps a lot. Okay, great. Commissioner Levin?
Sorry about that. Yeah, just to jump in on this topic real quick, I have been following it a little bit from next door, where people had been posting stuff about that. And one of the things that what I had heard was DT was basically saying, oh, you should have had these whole house surge protector systems, which was like kind of news to me, that was really something that DT had ever mentioned before. So I guess that would be one thing I'm kind of curious about, is who actually, are there people out there that really have these things, and how common is it? And is that really something that we should expect to have in our homes to protect? Certainly there's sensitive electronics, but a lot of these people had damage to the types of electronics that aren't typically the type of things you have surge protectors for. So I think that was part of from what I heard in the discussions that people were.
Sorry to jump in. I also have gotten comments from folks. People have had whole house surge protectors, and because of the voltage of this line that came down, it didn't matter if you had a whole house surge protector. So that's part of one of the also challenges of this specific case, but also, I think we're looking to provide, people with tools for resiliency in our community, but also, provide some level of good information and accountability as well.
No. Okay. Well, I will share that I'm interested in the home electrification expo and the energy advisor service, and I'd like to put on the agenda some reports back on those. I think following the energy advisor service will be really valuable, kind of to the point that we were discussing earlier, which is, getting more information out there to residents about what matters, and some investments they can make, especially given that there will be some new resources becoming available from the city and through the millage, and also from the federal rebates and tax credits. All right. Yes, Commissioner Hurt.
I'll just add for future agendas. I think this might have been on the one that we had done at the beginning of the year, but just another vote for taking a look at potentially getting someone to, or a forum on marginal emissions and the impact of marginal emissions is sort of one of a set of tools that we might be able to use, not only for the city, but also for a variety of different purposes.
All right. I will move to adjournment. Right. So it is currently 7:26 p.m. And as the chair, I declare this meeting adjourned.
Thanks all. Good night.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Great job, Claire.
Night.
First time.
Well,